Shall we begin? Good afternoon, everyone. We are reading in Book 1, the Book of Beginnings, Canto 3, the Yoga of the Soul's Release, the first stage of the yoga of King Asvapati, who will become the human father of Savitri. In the traditional legend, he is a childless king who offers 18 years of severe penance and tapasya to the goddess Savitri, the daughter of the sun and the creative Shakti of Lord Brahma. Aurobindo has expanded this 18 years of tapasya to cover almost half of his poem. We are just at the very beginning of this great journey. So we stopped at line 229, the secret face that is our own. And I'm going to read on from there. Page 28, line 230. Aurobindo was describing how King Asvapati was able to lift the heavy curtain of the flesh, this barrier of materiality that separates us from the subtle inner worlds. The inner planes uncovered their crystal doors. Strange powers and influences touched his life. A vision came of higher realms than ours, a consciousness of brighter fields and skies, of beings less circumscribed than brief-lived men, and subtler bodies than these passing frames. Objects too fine for our material grasp, acts vibrant with a superhuman light, and movements pushed by a superconscient force, and joys that never flowed through mortal limbs, and lovelier scenes than earth's, and happier lives. A consciousness of beauty and of bliss, a knowledge which became what it perceived, replaced the separated sense and heart, and drew all nature into its embrace. The mind leaned out to meet the hidden worlds. Air glowed and teemed with marvelous shapes and hues. In the nostrils quivered celestial fragrances. On the tongue lingered the honey of paradise. A channel of universal harmony. Hearing was a stream of magic audience, a bed for occult sounds earth cannot hear. Out of a covert tract of slumber self, The voice came of a truth submerged, unknown, that flows beneath the cosmic surfaces. Only mid an omniscient silence heard, held by intuitive heart and secret sense. It caught the burden of secrecies sealed and dumb. It voiced the unfulfilled demand of earth and the song of promise of unrealized heavens, and all that hides in an omnipotent sleep. In the unceasing drama carried by time on its long, listening flood that bears the world's insoluble doubt on a pilgrimage without goal, a laughter of sleepless pleasure foamed and spumed, and murmurings of desire that cannot die. A cry came of the world's delight to be, the grandeur and greatness of its will to live, recall of the soul's adventure into space, a traveler through the magic centuries, and being's labor in matter's universe, its search for the mystic meaning of its birth, and joy of high spiritual response, its throb of satisfaction and content in all the sweetness of the gifts of life. Its large breath and pulse and thrill of hope and fear, its taste of pangs and tears and ecstasy, its rapture's poignant beat of sudden bliss, the sob of its passion and unending pain, the murmur and whisper of the unheard sounds which crowd around our hearts but find no window to enter, swelled into a canticle of all that suffers to be still unknown, and all that labors vainly to be born, and all the sweetness none will ever taste, and all the beauty that will never be. Inaudible to our deaf mortal ears, the wide world rhythms wove their stupendous chant, to which life strives to fit our rhyme beats here, melting our limits in the illimitable, tuning the finite to infinity. A low muttering rose from the subconscient caves, the stammer of the primal ignorance. Answer to that inarticulate questioning, there stooped with lightning neck and thunder's wings a radiant hymn to the inexpressible, and the anthem of the superconscient light. Martin.
The inner planes uncovered their crystal doors. Strange thoughts and influences touched his life. A vision came of higher realms than ours. The consciousness of brighter fields and skies, of beings less circumscribed than brief-lived men, and subtler bodies than these passing frames. Objects too fine for material grasp. Acts vibrant with a superhuman light, and movements pushed by a superconscient force, and joys that never flowed through mortal limbs, and lovelier scenes than ours, and happier lives.
Thank you. These are the inner planes, the secret worlds, the subtle worlds that are within us. Later on in Book 2, King Aswapati will explore these planes and worlds in a systematic way. But at this stage in his yoga, he's being given glimpses of them in his inner being. So these inner planes of consciousness that are not dependent on this dense matter, they uncovered their crystal doors, these wonderful doors that are transparent, one can look through them, crystal, beautiful, precious slices of crystal. And it seems those doors open because strange powers and influences come and touch Aswapati's life. He's able to see higher realms than ours, realms beyond the material level. And he becomes conscious of brighter fields and skies. Aurobindo's written a sonnet, 14 lines, called The Other Earths, about these brighter fields and skies of the inner worlds and the effect that a contact with them can have on our lives. He becomes conscious of beings who are less circumscribed than brief-lived men. We human beings have a limited lifespan compared to those beings who are less circumscribed. They have less limits around them, or their limits are much wider and freer. Circumscribed, it means enclosed in a circle. Those beings have subtler bodies than these passing frames, these short-lived material bodies that we have. And in those worlds, he sees objects, just as we have objects here. But those objects on the subtle planes are too fine for our material grasp. We wouldn't be able to catch hold of them. They are made of a substance which is far less dense than ours. And he becomes aware that those beings are involved in actions that are vibrant with a superhuman light, a light of consciousness, and a powerfully vibrating force that's far beyond our present human capacities. He becomes aware of movements that are pushed, driven by a superconscient force, not this material energy that we know about, a conscious force from much higher realms. He becomes aware that those beings possess, and he begins to possess, a knowledge which became what it perceived. There's an identification with what is seen and known, so that there's a direct knowledge by identity, the way that we know things about ourselves became possible to know other beings and other objects. I'm sorry, I've run over, haven't I? Who is next? Bhavan, would you start with a consciousness of beauty and bliss?
A consciousness of beauty and of bliss, a knowledge which became what it perceived, replaced the separated sense and heart, and drew all nature into its embrace.
So this is the consciousness of those beings, of the subtle world. They have a consciousness of beauty and of bliss. And Asvapati is able to share in that consciousness. He is able to experience the kind of knowledge that they have, this direct knowledge, not knowledge through the senses and the mind's interpretation of sense impressions, but a direct knowledge, the kind of knowledge that we can have of things that happen within ourselves. So that consciousness and that knowledge replaced our experience of the separated sense and heart. We feel things that are separate from ourselves. And we may have some kind of empathy, sympathy with other human beings or with animals or things around us, but essentially we are separated. We are separated by the barriers of our skin, our bodies, no? But for Asvapati now, that separatedness gets replaced so that his consciousness is able to draw all nature into its embrace, to become aware of the feelings of plants and trees and all kinds of creatures. It's able to embrace and feel close to them all.
This sentence, a knowledge became what we perceive. What is it?
It, the knowledge.
Knowledge.
So what the knowledge perceived, like we look around, and we see and we know, oh, here's a table or here's a flower. There's an identification with that object of the perception, so that he knows the thing not just by its surface, but very, very deeply by an identification with the essence of the thing itself. A knowledge. So he has a capacity of knowledge, and it's a knowledge which can become whatever it perceives. Subho.
The mind leads out to meet the different world, a globe and teem with marvelous shapes and hugs. In the nostril verbal celestial fragrances, and the tongue lingered the honey of paradise. A channel of universal harmony, hearing was a stream of magic harmonies, a bag for occult sound earth cannot hear.
Yes. So these are things that we experience, the way that mind is interested and inclines towards something. No? Here, Aswapati's mind is leaning out from those secret chambers where he's sitting and looking into these subtle planes. It leans out to meet the hidden worlds. And his experience of those hidden worlds is of a completely different atmosphere. An air that's glowing, full of light, and it's teeming with marvelous shapes and hues. You know this word teeming?
Group of bees like that.
Yeah?
Group of
Bees or ants or something. Or sometimes we see on the TV or in films the streets of New York or Tokyo. They're just teeming with people. So many people you can't count them. No? So Sri Aurobindo in one place speaks about the teeming worlds in our universe. There are so many worlds beyond uncountable numbers. So here in that atmosphere, there are so many marvelous shapes and colors, hues, teeming. It's a very, very rich and vivid atmosphere. And there are perfumes in the nostrils. Here our nostrils quivered celestial fragrances, all kinds of heavenly perfumes. And on the tongue lingered the honey of paradise. These are yogic experiences. You know? This in meditation, going deep within and tasting, getting the taste of Amrita, of the nectar of immortality, the honey of paradise, or of perceiving wonderful perfumes, or of seeing these teeming shapes and colors of the subtle worlds. And the sense of hearing changes. It becomes a channel, like a river channel of universal harmony, harmonies from all over the universe. So this hearing becomes a stream, a flow of magic audience. We usually use this word in a different sense. An audience, I'm speaking, maybe you are the audience, you are listening to me. No, so we speak about the audience. But here it means the capacity of hearing, the sense of hearing. So his hearing becomes a stream of magic audience. He's hearing all kinds of wonderful, enchanting sounds. It becomes like a bed, a river bed, for occult sounds, hidden, subtle sounds that our physical ears cannot hear. And then comes a description of some of those things that he hears with that magic audience. Mihong.
Out of a covered track of a slumber self, the voice came of a truth submerged, unknown, that flows beneath the cosmic surfaces. Only middle omniscient silence heard, held by intuitive heart and secret sense.
Yes. So out of a covert tract, a secret occult area of slumber self, as if the self is in a state of deep sleep or trance, somewhere deep within, there comes a voice. It's the voice of a truth, but that truth is submerged as if underwater or underground. It's unknown, that truth. It's flowing like an underground river, subterranean river, beneath the surfaces of the universe. And we can only hear that voice. Asvapati can only hear that voice when he's in a state of silence, a silence that can know everything, an omniscient silence. And then it can only be held by the intuitive heart that gives an intuitive, correct, truthful response, and a secret sense, a different kind of sense than our grasping senses. Sri Aurobindo will tell us more about that voice. This is the voice of a truth which is flowing beneath the cosmic surfaces. Chandra.
It called the burden of secrets safe and done. It voiced the unfulfilled demand of the earth and the song of murmurs of unrealized heavens and all that hides in an omnipotent sleep.
Yes, this is the voice. And this voice caught the burden of secrecy sealed and dumb. The word burden has several different senses, and Sri Aurobindo uses all of them, I think, in this poem in different places. One of the meanings is of the chorus of a song, that there are certain lines, there's verses, each verse is different, but there are certain lines which get repeated again and again. And those are like the message of the song. And if somebody comes and gives you a message to carry to somebody else, when you repeat that message, you may not repeat exactly the same words that were said, but you try to give the same meaning, the burden of what you were told, the essential meaning. And of course the other meaning is of a heavy load. So we can see that all these meanings are connected. But here it's like the essence, the essential message of certain secrets, secret things which are closed up. They're not open and moving freely, and they are dumb, they can't be expressed, or they can't express themselves. But that voice which Asvapati hears expresses their message, the message of these secrecies. One of the things that it expresses, that it voices, is the unfulfilled demand of earth. What the earth, our material mother, what she is longing for. The world's desire, the earth's desire. This voice is able to express what it is, that fulfillment that the earth is longing for and which hasn't yet been granted to her. That voice also expresses the song of promise of unrealized heavens. So it's giving a promise from the higher worlds, from the higher levels of consciousness that haven't been manifested yet and that we haven't realized yet, but they are going to be. There is a promise, and that promise will, when it's realized, it will fulfill the demand of earth. And that voice also gives expression to many, many things, to everything that is hidden in a kind of sleep state of what hasn't yet been manifested. But it's an omnipotent sleep, an all-powerful sleep. It will gradually be expressed, all these things that are hiding in that sleep state. So he hears that voice, and then Sri Aurobindo tells about other things that Asvapati hears. Mohi, please read.
In the unceasing drama carried by time on its long listening flood that bears the world's insoluble doubt on a pilgrimage without goal, a laughter of sleepless pleasure, foam and spumed, and murmurings desire that cannot die. The cry came of the world's desire to be, the grandeur and greatness of its will to live. Recall the soul's adventure into space, the traveler through the magic centuries, and being's labor in natural universe. Its search for the mystic meaning of its birth, and joy of our spiritual response. Its throb of satisfaction and content in all the sweetness of the gifts of love. Its laughter breath and pulse and thrill of hope and fear, its taste of pangs and tears and ecstasy, its rapture, poignant beat of sudden bliss, the soul of its passion and unending pain.
So this is one of Sri Aurobindo's long sentences, long list of things. So this is what Asvapati hears. He hears this flood like an ocean, a long listening flood that's carrying, that's bearing the world's insoluble doubt, all our puzzlement and inability to understand the world that we are in. There is a flood, a flow, which is carrying us on a pilgrimage. But we don't know what is the goal of that pilgrimage. He says a pilgrimage without goal. Actually, it has a goal, but we don't know what that goal is. But on that flow of life, we can say, of subtle life, on the surface, as like bubbles on the surface of water, there's a laughter of sleepless pleasure, foamed in like bubbles, and spume when the bubbles fly up in the air. And there's also the sound of murmurings of desire that cannot die, unsatisfied desire that is in that flood. And he hears a cry, an expression of the world's delight to be, the delight of existence. The grandeur and greatness of its will to live. That's what keeps the world going, is this push of existence to continue to explore, to grow more and more. And in that cry, there's also a recall, a memory, or a reminder of the soul's adventure into space. The soul is, in its eternal, infinite existence, is beyond time and space and manifestation and individuality. But the soul has entered into space. It's undertaken the adventure of involution in all these different planes of existence, eventually in matter also. The soul's adventure into space. And in the manifestation, the soul is a traveler through all these magic, enchanted centuries. So the voice reminds something of that, or that laughter reminds of that, and of the effort, all the effort that goes into life in the universe of matter, all the struggle, beings labor. Labor also has the idea of giving birth to something. It can be hard effort, but it can also be that effort which is required to give birth to something new. So being is laboring, the world is laboring, the world is also searching for the mystic meaning of its birth. How and why has all this come into existence? And then there's the joy of high spiritual response, if we feel a connection and a response from higher levels. And part of the world's delight to be is just a kind of constant throb of satisfaction and content. It's not intense rapture, it's not intense pain, but just content and satisfaction to exist. Content with all the sweetness of the gifts of life. And the gifts that life gives are many. No? It can give a large breath and pulse and thrill of hope and fear, a kind of adventurous feeling. Life can give different tastes, the taste of pangs, of pain and tears, but also the taste of ecstatic delight. The poignant, almost painful beat of rapture. It's a delight that's almost too much to bear, no? Especially when it comes suddenly, a sudden bliss. And then there's the sob, the weeping or the sob of passion and unending pain. All this is part of the delight, the different rasas, the different tastes of delight of life. So he hears all those things. And then something more. Sarojini.
The murmur and whisper of the unheard sounds which go around our hearts but find no window to enter, swell into a
Canticle.
Of all that's supposed to be still unknown, and all that labors
Vainly.
to be born, and all the sweetness none will ever taste, that all the beauty that will never be.
This is a very poignant sentence. No? We don't hear those sounds. There's a murmur and a whisper of sounds crowding around our hearts, but they don't find any way to enter our consciousness. But now to Aswapati's subtle hearing, those murmurs and whispers, they swell into a canticle. It's a kind of sacred song, a hymn. And who is singing this hymn? There's so many unmanifested things. All that suffers to be still unknown. It hasn't manifested yet. We can't know it and experience it. It's trying to be born, but in vain. These are things that belong to the future. No? Or there may be things that will never be manifested. There's the sweetness. Nobody will ever taste it. It will as if go wasted. No? And all the beauty that will never be, it will never come into existence. He hears all those voices. Sergei.
In Auroville, over the mortal years, the white wall rhythms wore their stupendous charm, to which light strives to fit our blind beats here, noting our limits in the image of tuning the finite to infinite.
Yes. So another thing that our deaf mortal ears don't hear, can't hear, is the rhythms, the rhythmic vibrations that are moving around in the world, like a stupendous dance, a chant. It's also a song. And life, our life, is trying to harmonize us, the beats of our individual lives, to the rhyme beats of that stupendous chant. They want to melt our little limits that circumscribe our lives, to tune us into those great universal rhythms, tuning the finite, us limited beings, to infinity. He hears those wide world rhythms, and he realizes, recognizes that life is trying to tune in our lives and our rhythms to those great wide world rhythms, tuning the finite to infinity. Ganga Lakshmi.
A low glittering rose from the subconscious scales, the stammer of the primal ignorance, answer to that inarticulate question. There stood with the lightning neck and thunder wings, a radiant hymn to the inexpressible, the content of the superconscient life.
Yes. Such beautiful lines we have read today. One of the things that he hears is this low muttering, speaking under your breath so that people can't really hear what you're saying. And often you're muttering because you don't want other people to hear what you're saying, because you're grumbling, you're complaining. So from the deep caves of the subconscious world, he hears this low muttering coming up. And he recognizes that that's the stammer of the primal ignorance, the very, very lowest levels of the universe trying to express themselves. No? And there's a response from above in answer to that inarticulate questioning. They're muttering and they're saying, why? Why does it have to be like this? No? But they can't really say it, they can't express it. No? But there's a response from above. There comes stooping down. It's the verb for a bird of prey swooping out of the heavens to catch its prey. It comes stooping down. And this is like a vast bird that comes down. It has a neck of lightning and it has thunder's wings, so its descent is something very, very powerful. But what is coming is a hymn, a radiant hymn of praise to the inexpressible, to what we cannot express, the ineffable, the inexpressible. And also it expresses the anthem, another kind of very serious, sacred song of the superconscient light, the light above, far above, on the summit of consciousness. That's what comes down in response to that inarticulate grumbling and muttering and questioning that is there at the subconscious levels. So all this he can hear with his new subtle hearing, his magic audience.
In all these lines, both the earth's nature and the subtler planes and so on.
Yes, it's from below is coming this low muttering and complaining and questioning. But there's such a wonderful, powerful response from above.
Even in the previous lines also it was mentioned.
Where did it come?
This is about the lives thing, that gives of
That life is trying, all the gifts of life, yes.
But they are also put under some pressure or some unhappiness.
Well, here in the material world, yes. But he's expressing, he's becoming aware of how things are in those subtler worlds. And there he can perceive these this truth that is submerged, that is running underground. Of course it's having an effect, but we are not aware of it. It's flowing beneath the cosmic silences, surfaces. We would have to fall very, very deeply silent in order to be able to hear it. But Aswapati hears it.
That's what he's experiencing in this place.
Yes. When he lifts the heavy curtain of the flesh, these experiences start to come. And if I may say so, I think that these are not permanent realizations. These are experiences that come. And people, we see from Aurobindo's letters to disciples that people were having experiences like this. And Aurobindo in his sadhana, he must also have had such experiences. And I think I mentioned last week, that one of the scholars at the Aurobindo archives, Richard Hartz, he is looking particularly at this part of Savitri to correlate the experiences that are evoked here so in such amazing poetry with little notes that Aurobindo has kept in his record of yoga. Just very, very brief notes. Perhaps to remind himself or to just note something down. I think these are among the most beautiful lines in the whole poem. There are so many wonderful lines, but what a wonderful passage we read today. So those who would like to stay and read, we can go back to line 230 and read these lines. The inner planes uncovered their crystal doors. Strange powers and influences touched his life. A vision came of higher realms than ours, a consciousness of brighter fields and skies, of beings less circumscribed than brief-lived men, and subtler bodies than these passing frames, objects too fine for our material grasp, acts vibrant with a superhuman light, and movements pushed by a superconscient force, and joys that never flowed through mortal limbs, and lovelier scenes than earth's, and happier lives. A consciousness of beauty and of bliss, a knowledge which became what it perceived, replaced the separated sense and heart, and drew all nature into its embrace. The mind leaned out to meet the hidden worlds. Air glowed and teemed with marvelous shapes and hues. In the nostrils quivered celestial fragrances. On the tongue lingered the honey of paradise. A channel of universal harmony. Hearing was a stream of magic audience. A bed for occult sounds earth cannot hear. Out of a covered tract of slumber self, the voice came of a truth submerged, unknown, that flows beneath the cosmic surfaces. Only mid an omniscient silence heard, held by intuitive heart and secret sense. It caught the burden of secrecies sealed and dumb. It voiced the unfulfilled demand of earth, and the song of promise of unrealized heavens, and all that hides in an omnipotent sleep. In the unceasing drama carried by time on its long listening flood that bears the world's insoluble doubt on a pilgrimage without goal, a laughter of sleepless pleasure foamed and spumed, and murmurings of desire that cannot die. A cry came of the world's delight to be, the grandeur and greatness of its will to live, recall of the soul's adventure into space, a traveller through the magic centuries, and being's labour in matter's universe, its search for the mystic meaning of its birth, and joy of high spiritual response, its throb of satisfaction and content in all the sweetness of the gifts of life, its large breath and pulse and thrill of hope and fear, its taste of pangs and tears and ecstasy, its rapture's poignant beat of sudden bliss, the sob of its passion and unending pain. The murmur and whisper of the unheard sounds which crowd around our hearts but find no window to enter, swelled into a canticle of all that suffers to be still unknown, and all that labours vainly to be born, and all the sweetness none will ever taste, and all the beauty that will never be. Inaudible to our deaf mortal ears, the wide world rhythms wove their stupendous chant, to which life strives to fit our rhyme beats here, melting our limits in the illimitable, tuning the finite to infinity. A low muttering rose from the subconscient caves, the stammer of the primal ignorance. Answer to that inarticulate questioning, there stooped with lightning neck and thunder's wings a radiant hymn to the inexpressible, and the anthem of the superconscient light.